natural disasters, and man-made catastrophes. Events that can cause enormous loss of life, destruction, and hardship. In desperate hours, you'll become an eyewitness to some of the most noteworthy disasters of the last 100 years. This episode is bound to hit viewers where they live, which is really where we all live, inside our own bodies. Earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, volcanoes, and all the cataclysms that threaten human life. All of them are terrifying in their own way. But perhaps nothing is more chilling than the threat of disease, of epidemics. No other disaster feels more personal than something that literally gets under the skin. And in recent times, the threat of not merely an epidemic, but a pandemic which could annihilate mankind has somehow never seemed more real. But before we hit the panic button, let's brace ourselves by calmly and coolly examining the facts. Ebola. Humans and some primates are vulnerable to this disease, which is a particularly unpleasant one. Between a couple of days and 3 weeks after contracting the virus, its symptoms become all too clear, starting with fever, a sore throat, headaches, and muscle pains. But that's just a preview to the horror show that comes next. Vomiting, diarrhea, and skin rashes, malfunctioning liver and kidneys, internal and external bleeding, including in some cases, blood leaking from the eyes. It gets worse still. Around 50% of recorded infections have resulted in death, around a week to 2.5 weeks after the symptoms of Ebola first appear.
Ebola, even just from the sound of the name Ebola, it's frightening, it's scary.
And these people eventually end up dying, and some of them have had actually minor bleedings from their mouth.
People will think it's not a big deal, and then it will get out of hand again and continue to spread for weeks and months and years, and that's what we have to stop.
By the time people are dead with the Ebola, they are more infectious than all. So if they take care of their burial or their own, 10 more will be infected.
We might tend to think of Ebola as a recent development, but actually it was first identified in 1976 in a village near the Ebola River. The scientist who named the disease Ebola, one Peter Pyatt, is now director of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Although he first identified the virus in a village named Yambuku, he decided to spare the little town the stigma. Thus, Ebola got its name. Since its detection, the disease has flared up several times. Between 1976 and 2013, the World Health Organization reported a total of 24 outbreaks, including 1,716 fatalities. Bad enough, you might think, but in 2014, things took a turn for the worse. In March of that year, the World Health Organization reported a major outbreak in the West African nation of Guinea. The disease quickly spread to Liberia and Sierra Leone, Guinea's closest neighbors. On August 8, 2014, the World Health Organization declared the epidemic an international public health emergency. Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, described the situation in Liberia as catastrophic and deteriorating daily. Such was the fear and panic caused by Ebola. It actually kept people away from hospitals, leaving some patients with other conditions without proper treatment.
Well, the outbreak isn't contained, so collectively we're not doing enough yet. which is not surprising since this is the first outbreak in West Africa, so the governments are not experienced in responding to this.
Their health facilities are completely overwhelmed. Poor countries, they weren't all that brilliant to start with. I'm not criticising them, they're just not.
Panic and fear can be much more harmful than the disease itself. Maybe there will only be one case, but the harm that is produced by the fear on the economy, on people, may be bigger.
Still, in August of 2014, the disease spread to Nigeria, and one case was reported in Senegal. And on the 30th of September, the first confirmed case of Ebola in the United States ended 8 days later with the patient's death. On 29 December 2014, the first case was confirmed in the United Kingdom.
A high-level isolation ward at the Royal Free Hospital in North London has been on standby.
Even after 30 years, there is still much that is unknown about the disease. For example, although it is known that it is spread by direct contact with the blood or bodily fluid of an infected human or animal, there is still some doubt as to whether fruit bats are a regular carrier, apparently able to spread the virus without themselves being made sick by it. But advances are being made all the time, and diseases can be eradicated. After all, it's happened before. Take smallpox, which historians believe was with humankind since the first agricultural settlements about 10,000 BC. Mummified remains of Egyptian pharaohs contain the first definitive evidence of smallpox in the ancient world, though the first written accounts of the disease didn't appear until the 4th century AD in China. It rampaged through Europe in the Middle Ages, and later, in the 18th century, was said to be responsible for the deaths of 5 reigning monarchs. Characterized by blisters on the face, arms, and legs, the last case of smallpox in the US was back in 1949, and one other case was in Somalia in 1977. The WHO certified that smallpox had been eradicated in 1979. This was just 5 years after one of the most serious outbreaks of the 20th century. It happened in India between January and May 1974, where an estimated 15,000 people died, mainly in the states of Bihar, Orissa, and West Bengal. Of the survivors, thousands were left disfigured or blinded. Yet, as we said, by 1980, smallpox was certified as being eliminated by the World Health Organization, following their global smallpox eradication program.
The Somalia smallpox eradication program recorded the last case in Merka town, and it seemed to me that this was the last known case of smallpox in the world.
This was a big change for people in India and parts of Africa, where smallpox had long been considered a routine fact of life. However, it does seem at times as if the ingenuity of scientists and doctors is in a constant arms race against diseases that can mutate and take on a new form. Case in point, cholera. In straightforward terms, cholera is an acute intestinal infection caused by eating or drinking contaminated food or water. The time between infection and the first symptoms is sometimes less than 1 day, 5 days at the most. The symptoms are diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and unsurprisingly, severe dehydration. Without proper treatment, death can come on fast. Prevention is better than cure, But when treatment is really the only option, then the faster the better. Number one is rehydration. That's the replacement of lost body fluids using ORS, oral rehydration salts, namely salt and sugar mixed in with clean drinking water. Intravenous fluids and antibiotics all have their part to play in a cure. These are hardly luxury items, but when cholera strikes in a developing nation, they can be scarce commodities.
Once the bacteria does get into the water supply or gets into the food chain, it's very hard to contain without those basics, without the rehydration fluid and without clean water.
We know that over the last 12 months we've seen reported cases of about 19,000 outbreaks of cholera. We also know that over 1,000 people have died as a result of that.
The first recorded cholera pandemic ravaged the Bengal region of India beginning around 1816 and lasted some 7 years. Highly contagious, cholera spread to Southeast Asia, China, Japan, the Middle East, southern Russia, and around the world. Pandemic cholera outbreaks wreaked havoc throughout the 19th century. Ironically, the spread of cholera was helped by advances in technology, transport, and the mass movements of migration. However, it wasn't until 1854 before an Englishman named John Snow identified its primary cause as contaminated water. But from 1992 onwards, the so-called El Tor strain has been the dominant strain in all new cholera outbreaks. Testimony to the disease's ability to mutate and adapt. Since 2010, El Tor cholera outbreaks have occurred in places such as Haiti, South Sudan, Mexico, Pakistan, and Sierra Leone. In a world that has become as connected as the one we live in, how can mankind ever hope to stop the spread of disease? This is Heathrow Airport. On average, about 200,000 people arrive and depart from here every day. If just a handful of them are carrying a highly infectious disease, the potential consequences are, well, sobering to say the least. That's just a geopolitical reality. But what can you do to personally stay safe? Because as we all know, prevention is better than cure. The Mayo Clinic in the US recommends washing your hands regularly, staying at home if you do fall ill, getting vaccinated where appropriate, practicing safe sex and other common sense measures, like preparing your food hygienically. As for the proverbial big picture, as you can imagine, scientific researchers are always looking for new ways to stop illnesses from upgrading to epidemics. And never has this been more critical. As the publication Science Alert reported in December 2008, climate change, along with increasing populations, overuse of antibiotics, and global trade and travel can affect both the likelihood of a new disease emerging and the opportunity for diseases to spread to new populations. Dr. Julie Lynn Hall, who is a communicable diseases expert with the World Health Organization, has made the point that we are seeing the return of diseases like cholera and malaria, previously thought eradicated. But also for the last 3 decades, the WHO has seen the emergence on average of 1 new communicable disease per year. And apparently, the incidence of new syndromes is on the rise. This is a global concern. So where do we look for answers to understand how diseases spread and how to contain them? The study of societal networks can help us understand how diseases can spread. The fact that diseases pass from one individual to another via certain types of contact, and that any given individual only has a limited number of contacts, is the starting point for this kind of statistical analysis. That may sound a little abstract, but success in containing the spread of potential pandemics like SARS and avian bird flu suggests these studies are time well spent. While humanity still battles with maladies that have literally plagued us for centuries, new and deadly diseases have made themselves known in the new millennium. Notably SARS and bird or avian flu. Beginning with SARS, short for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. The disease was first reported in the Guangdong province of China. It is believed it was transferred to human beings from Chinese horseshoe bats and from a feline-looking mammal known as a civet, considered something of a delicacy in that region.
听说有的是没收嘛，那个人家主人家公安过来没收嘛，没收听他们说没收的火化嘛。
那当然怕啦！如果真正是有的这里面的，那怎么不怕？
Generally speaking, SARS begins with a high fever, temperatures higher than 38 degrees Celsius. Other symptoms include headaches, general discomfort, and bodily aches and pains. Mild respiratory symptoms at the outset, a dry cough, and in some cases diarrhea are all indicative. Most patients also develop pneumonia. However, no two cases of SARS are precisely the same. The disease can run rather different courses depending on a patient's age and level of fitness. A critical point seems to be around the third week, when the young and strong often start to improve. For the less fortunate, this is when the disease becomes more severe, when the lungs become clogged with fluid and debris, and more aggressive treatment is applied, such as mechanical ventilation. This is certainly not effective in all cases. Worldwide, the death rate from SARS seems to be about 10%. In 2003, the illness spread to more than 24 countries before it was contained. It's remarkable that the disease was effectively contained when you consider how easily it is spread, specifically by person-to-person contact when someone infected coughs or sneezes.
The situation we are facing now is an extremely serious situation. Never before in the whole world, the healthcare system has been put under such immense stress. Now over 200 nurses and doctors fell ill to this illness.
According to the WHO, some 8,098 people worldwide contracted SARS during the 2003 outbreak. Of these, 774 died from the disease. Tragic for all those people and their families, but things could have been worse, a lot worse. Once again, the WHO worked with governments of many nations and stemmed what could have been a global catastrophe. Avian influenza, known more informally as avian flu or bird flu, is an infectious virus that spreads among birds, and in some cases, human beings. Now, of course, most diseases that affect birds are not harmful to human beings. But two strains in particular have emerged in recent years that can be fatal. Even though these viruses are not thought to be transferred from one human to another, thousands of people have been infected since the first outbreak was detected in 1997, resulting in hundreds of fatalities. It was in that year, in China, that a strain of bird flu known as H5N1 laid waste to geese on a Chinese farm. The disease was found to have infected humans during poultry outbreaks in Hong Kong in 1997. 18 people were infected, 6 of whom died. It was unclear how the disease was being passed from birds to humans. Just the same, a mass culling of all poultry in Hong Kong may have prevented a global epidemic.
We have just started the chicken slaughtering operation in the Cheung Sha Wan temporary poultry market. And we estimate that the number of birds to be slaughtered today will be in the range of some 40,000 birds.
想了想，这刚好现在是那个流感的病发期嘛。
如果而家係發現呢種菌咁啊，梗係唔食啦，暫時唔食啦。
醫療防禦人員由於能力不高，技術條件比較差，不能及時的判斷和發現疫情。
For a time, it may have even looked as if H5N1 had been eradicated. But in December 2003, it was back. Reported first in South Korea, where it caused outbreaks in commercial poultry farms. In January 2004, severe respiratory illnesses in 11 children were reported in Hanoi, Vietnam, that was soon confirmed as H5N1 bird flu. By the end of the month, there had been more than 400 outbreaks in Vietnam. The disease was then detected on a Japanese poultry farm in Kyoto. By the end of January, Cambodia, Laos, Indonesia and China reported outbreaks in poultry, and in Thailand, 2 more human cases were confirmed. No strain of avian influenza had ever infected as many countries all at once. Thailand and Vietnam recorded a total of 35 human cases, 24 of which ended in death. It soon became apparent that despite all the efforts to control the virus, it had become endemic, which is to say, permanently present in parts of Asia. Migratory birds and possibly the poultry trade have since spread the virus to over 40 countries. What's more, the virus is now genetically different to the one first detected in Hong Kong in 1997. The current strain, known as the Z strain, has been shown to be more pathogenic, capable of infecting an expanding range of animals, including pigs, as well as cats and dogs. So are we fighting a losing battle against a global killer?
The longer the virus is circulating in animals, including chickens and ducks, the greater the risk of human cases, and consequently, the higher the risk of a pandemic virus.
Well, in all scenarios, we take into account that up to 30% of the population might get sick over a 15-week period.
Yes, it's a very difficult matter. Eradication will come in many years. It's a matter of many years.
Ebola and cholera in Africa, SARS and bird flu, principally in Asia. All of them diseases with frightening potential to go global in a flash. Smallpox we seem to have defeated, but that's what was thought about cholera just a few years back. If we as a species are to endure, we have to be ever vigilant as individuals. Don't forget to wash your hands before you handle food, for example. But we must also be able to act collectively against the spread of disease. Because when the enemy are literally germs, it's well to remember epidemics don't recognize territorial borders.